Hey everyone, welcome to Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast. I am Heather Hoops Matthews, here today with Seth Hudson. He's an intellectual property attorney at Maynard Nexsen serving the life sciences industry, and we are delighted to have joining us Sophia McLeod. She is the Advocacy Advisor at ACRO, an industry organization representing the world's leading clinical research and technology organizations advocating for safe, ethical, high-quality medical research so that patients can benefit from the development of new treatments and therapies. Sophia, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your role and how you got into this position.
Sure. So I kind of do everything under the sun as it comes to congressional engagement. We sort of bracket stuff out from legislative to regulatory work. So I'm really strongly in the legislative work, but I pick up a little regulatory because we're a tiny team. And I've done this work with ACRO for the past 8 years now. Oh, wow. And prior to that, I was at another healthcare-related trade association. Before that, I was at the VA doing congressional affairs. So I've really been a sort of DC policy nerd my whole professional life.
Well, that's good in these times.
Yes, it is helpful.
How do you work with Congress to move AI legislation forward?
It's a good question. I think, there's a lot with Congress comes down to education. I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, where members and their staffs need to know a bit about a lot of things. They're focused on a lot all the time. So they're really, if you think about it, they're like generalists in a way. Mm-hmm. And so I think for what we do and for our members, it's really about getting up there, letting them know about, one, the industry, what our members do in the industry, mm-hmm. what the impacts of that work is to their constituents and sort of what else goes on in their district, whether that's businesses or whatever the case may be. And when it comes to AI, it's really sort of trying to demystify, I think, a lot of what we think about with AI. I think I certainly am not a scientist. Like I said, I'm a policy nerd. So this is very outside the realm of my formal education. But it's really being able to kind of break down some of those complex things that the science-minded folks at our member companies, for example, are working on and talk about it in plain language and kind of help them understand what we're currently doing, what we maybe need from policymakers on the Hill and then down the road from regulators, but really to kind of help us innovate and keep moving forward. So it's a long-standing sort of like education feedback loop. I think a really important thing also is not to only engage with Congress when you have an ask. I think a long-standing relationship where you're checking in, not to ask them for help or for your name in a bill or something like that, but to let them know what work you're doing and just sort of be like, hey, we released this report. You might find it interesting. Here you go. I think that's like really important to build those long-lasting relationships. It really is a relationship game, honestly. Education, relationships. Yeah. We try to leverage all of that to do the work.
Whether it's AI or something else,
Mm-hmm.
what's some legislation that you see coming down the pike?
Gosh. Well, someone was making a joke earlier, and I'm going to steal it, but I sort of like left my crystal ball at home for this day. So It's always hard to say with Congress. I think, this year they've been really focused on reconciliation. A lot of the stuff that's really taking up the energy on the Hill is completely outside of what we do in clinical trials. And that's just sort of regular things that need to get passed, whether it's a big reconciliation package or appropriations that need to be done every year. Right now, we're talking about a continuing resolution. So that really just takes up a lot of the oxygen. And you're always contending with those sort of regular order type of things. Right. I think from a real grounded in clinical trials perspective, we'd love to see a little bit more work on AI. We've been doing a lot of work with the FDA on AI and sort of like bypassing Congress right now just because it takes a long time to put some of these big packages together. And the FDA has really been kind of leading out front. And I can talk more about that forever. But would love to see something on AI. We have the task force in the House that's been working on AI, a similar group in the Senate. They've both put out white papers and frameworks about what they would like to see any AI-related legislation look like or consider. And now they're really in the process of drafting some legislation that would kind of hopefully take on some of those principles. And then everything else outside of AI, there's so many things. But, we do a lot of work right now on the idea around the tax treatment of payments that patients are given as part of their participation in a clinical trial. So we're focused on a couple bills there, which has been really interesting. It's kind of dipping my toe in the tax space, which is always new. We'd love to see an update to the 21st Century Cures Act, and we've been working with Congresswoman DeGette on that over the past few years. There's been a couple iterations and never really like one that's really gone the full distance. So bills like that, which are huge packages, take a long time. So
Sure.
I think that's part of it too, is just like, it's a long game, and kind of like to what I was saying before, you stay engaged and you keep working with them and try to be helpful as you can. But yeah, the year's running out is the thing. There's only a few legislative days left, it feels like, with contending with Thanksgiving and then the Christmas break. And so time is dwindling, but we'd love to see some of those things.
Yes, thank you.
And AI is obviously a hot topic. We've talked about it a lot on this podcast, conference, pretty much every conference that we've attended in the past year or two. But what do you think are the biggest challenges of using AI in clinical research?
I think we have a couple challenges to contend with. I think one is regulatory uncertainty. I did say, obviously, FDA is doing a lot of great work here. I think the clinical trials industry, probably like a lot of other industries, we sort of loathe uncertainty. We want to have a very clear yes or no answer. A lot of the companies, I should say, do. And so, for us, it's always thinking about how can we make FDA a little clearer on what they're letting people know. Because I think people, they want to know the rules of the road, right? They want to know sort of like the sandbox in which they can play. And so we're getting a lot of great output from FDA, and we've been lucky to be very collaborative with them on that. So that's been good. But I think no matter what they put out, there's always going to be calls for just a little more certainty. I think also you're sort of dealing with this idea that people are still a little hesitant to trust maybe some outputs from AI technologies, which is valid. Like I was saying at the top, like this stuff is complicated, and it's hard to really be like, yeah, that sounds great. This robot told me what to do. Like, I think that's how people perceive this a lot. And so trying to really, again, go back into that education and sort of let people know how it works, and the fact that as far as our members are concerned, there's always that constant human in the loop, that oversight there. We're not letting the computers run amok or anything. And then also, I think the last thing I would say is sort of around there just not being enough, I would say, good quality data or access to good quality data to train these models. So I think there's a bit of that. Like the models are doing well, similar to certainty. We'd always want better and more quality data that we can train them on, fine tune them, and be able to really sort of, again, that just plays into the trust piece. So I think those are the ones that come to mind.
You mentioned the FDA. Elaborate a little bit more there, and have you been surprised at all with how that's gone?
Yeah, I do think sometimes regulators sort of seem like these like far off, mysterious characters in a tower that like you can't really access. And not to toot our own horn or anything, but I do think ACRO's done a really great job, and this is our entire staff, but a really great job building relationships with the FDA over the years. It started when we did a lot of work on risk-based quality management, or RBQM, a million acronyms in the business, I'm sure you guys know. And then we've really parlayed that into work with them on AI. And they've been really receptive to, how we're thinking about it, how our members are using AI. I think there's a lot around explainability and transparency. And so I think they appreciate having that on the ground, insight into how things are being used and maybe some of the challenges we run up against, how we're solving them, and how we'd like to work with them to kind of, again, write those rules of the road. So they've been really collaborative, which has been great. And I don't know that every regulator and industry experience is like that. And I think that's a good thing that drives industries forward, and they're constantly taking on feedback, learning, adjusting, and as are we, right? Like we're constantly taking what they put out in guidances or whatever channels these communications come out through. So it's been a really good relationship, honestly, and it's been more collaborative, I'd say, surprising, than I maybe thought before I started kind of dipping my toe into the regulatory work.
Well, you would hope it would be that way.
Exactly.
Right. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
Are most companies using AI with clinical trials now? And what do you think about the future of AI in clinical trials?
I think it's safe to say that all of our member companies are using AI in some capacity. It kind of runs the gamut. There are some that I think use AI in like HR, workflow, internal ops type of stuff, and I don't know anything about what they're doing over there. But in the clinical research space, it's a really diversified area. People are using it in study startup and patient recruitment, helping to find patients who might fit clinical trials in a way that would take a human forever to do. I don't know how many hours, but a long time of just like looking up zip codes and finding. Listen, again, the computers are doing the work. It's great. And then they sort of tell you like, hey, here are some patients that might be a fit. And then of course the actual people go out and then work from there. We have a company who's doing something very interesting in like early onset dementia work, which is a really hard area to find patients early before they're diagnosed and then get them into studies so that we can try to see these warning signs earlier and kind of intervene a little bit earlier and hopefully slow the progression. Or, I mean, it would be amazing if we could just stop it entirely. Right. And so they're doing some work there about sort of like looking at EHRs and kind of looking for these warning signs and using AI to sort of like mine EHRs in that way, which I think is fascinating. So yeah, a really like diversified use, I would say, of AI. I forget the last part of your question.
And what about the future?
Oh, the future.
Yeah.
Yes. I think the future is bright. I would say it's bright. I do think, again, as we sort of build more of a repository of legislation and then subsequent reg and guidance from the FDA, I think it'll only help people innovate more. I think sometimes that probably sounds like an oxymoron. I'm sure some people think that like regulation is stifling to innovation. But again, I think having clear rules of the road lets people know what they can do and they'll run with that, right? And they will innovate and they'll feel confident about what they're innovating on. And so I think as we continue to play around with some of these AI models and see what they can do and how we can integrate them into the work that our member companies are doing, I think it's a really exciting time. Again, not a scientist, so I don't know exactly what they're going to be able to do next, but I do think it's kind of fun. And again, grounding all of this in, I think, like our mission of getting treatments to patients as fast and as safely as possible, obviously, but as fast as possible. There are, diseases that can't wait. And so we want to get those treatments to patients who need them. And if this is going to help us do that, we're going to go all in, and really kind of push the boat out and see what we can do.
Yeah. Well, it does seem like the new frontier that you're on. And Sophia, we appreciate you. On behalf of our whole Pulse crowd and the viewers, thank you for taking the time during the conference. I know you were on a panel earlier.
It was a warm-up for this.
Warm-up for this. Okay, good. But thank you for the good work that you do, and we wish you the best.
Well, likewise. Thank you guys for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah,
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.